Alright, so welcome back. By now, you've probably noticed that we use a lot of descriptive terms in Ayurveda when we're talking about body types, behaviours, actions, food, illnesses. Words like hot and cold. So, for example, we talked about how the Pitta type has a lot of heat, right, in their mind and in their body and in their digestion, whereas Kapha and Vata tend to be colder, right? Cold to touch, cooler digestions as well. So this is really central to Ayurveda, a word called gunas, and gunas are qualities, right? Things like hot and cold is how we describe everything in the universe. There's believed to be 20 primordial gunas in Ayurveda, but you don't have to know them all. But it can be really helpful to know 3 of the pairs. There's 10 pairs, and 3 of them that are really central are hot and cold, oily and dry, and heavy and light. Using these qualities, you can start to describe your experiences. So for example, if you're paying attention to how you feel after each meal, you might notice that you often feel hot. And that might tell you something about how your body's responding to what you're eating. You might feel heavy, and then you might look at your foods and realizing that you're eating heavy foods or lots of oils, things like that. So we start to use these words to describe how we feel. Now, at the beginning of the program, we understood that a central concept in this program is the idea of digestion. And there's this great Ayurvedic proverb that says, without proper diet, medicine is of no use, and with proper diet, medicine is of no need. So we use diet, as you're learning, in Ayurveda to achieve optimal health. And these gunas also apply to your food, and understanding that can help you understand how your foods may affect your body. Now we know that we all have a unique body type, so not everybody's going to respond the same way. But it can be helpful to know that some foods are considered to be heating, like chilies, onion, garlic, of course hot spices. Whereas foods that are cold or cooling would be things like mint, cucumber, coconut, cilantro, fennel, cumin. Also, some foods are considered to be heavy. All rich foods and fried foods, red meat. And other foods are considered to be light. Popcorn is like the ultimate light food. Ginger, and also chilies. Right? So chilies are hot, but they're also light. Some foods are considered to be oily. Think about not just oils, but avocado, considered to be an oily food. Oranges and grapefruit have an oiliness to them. And then some foods are considered dry, like barley and millet. Raw vegetables, pulses, things like lentils and beans have a dryness to them. So if, as we've discussed, foods and behaviours containing certain qualities, for example a chili is hot, will increase those qualities in you. So adding spices to your food, to your meals, will increase heat in your body, your mind and your digestion. If you need more heat, right, you tend to be very Kapha or Vata, that would be a good thing. It might energize you. It might help with your circulation, keep you warm. But of course, if you already have a lot of fire and then you're adding more and it's the really hot chilies and lots of onions and peppers, then you might be feeling heartburn, acidity, feeling like you are frustrated, or these sort of hot emotions like jealousy, right? This sort of a fiery emotion. So we want to understand that these foods that we're eating, of course, have a capacity to affect us. And we can use this to balance ourselves when we're feeling imbalanced, or just sort of knowing your general tendency, you start to modify how you're eating. These can really work in our favour. We know that dairy is cooling, so we don't recommend a lot of it for Kapha types or in Kapha season in the spring. And yet, because it's cooling, a great Ayurvedic remedy if you don't sleep well is to take a cup of milk that has been boiled and then cooled a little, maybe just a little raw sugar or honey in there or cardamom. Take that before bed. It has a cooling effect on the physiology, and when the temperature in the body drops, and it's only by maybe half a degree, that's when we fall asleep, right? It's very hard for us to sleep in a very hot room. So we can use these to our advantages. In the spring, of course, we want to focus on foods that are light, dry, and warm, because around us There's a lot of moisture, there's a lot of heaviness and coolness. We want to do the opposite. Now, once it gets to summer, of course, we'll want foods that are cooling. And then in the fall and early winter, when there's a lot of dryness and movement, a lot of wind, vata time of year, that's when we want heavy foods and oily foods and warm foods, right? So the other thing that's helpful to know in terms of food as medicine is just understanding its qualities, but also what we call the 6 rasas, or the 6 tastes. And those are sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. Just like we learned how the doshas are composed of the 5 elements, so are the 6 tastes. In fact, so is everything in the universe. But very specifically, the sweet taste is formed out of the earth and water elements. Sweet taste would be foods like dairy, poultry, and of course sweeteners, honey and sugar, and then sweet fruits, peaches, and strawberries, and then sweet vegetables, snap peas, carrots, and beets are some examples. So all of those foods have a sweet taste that is composed of the earth and water elements. So we can sort of deduce from that, if it's earth and water, it's kind of like kapha. There's a heaviness to it. So it's good to know that these tastes would be great in times of excess vata later in your life, or if you're a vata body type, or you live in a vata climate like we do, or, for example, vata time of year, right? And we also now know that we might want to minimize that taste in the spring, or when there's excess kapha present. We don't want more kapha on top of kapha. So that's the sweet taste. It does promote kapha, it promotes heaviness, it promotes weight gain, and in excess it could promote sort of laziness, obesity, tumors, even depression, right? Because everything that we eat affects not just our body but our mind. So that's the sweet taste. Now the sour taste then is a combination of the earth element with the fire element, earth and fire. So it has some heaviness still, but also some heat to it. And sour foods would be foods such as lemons, of course, but also fermented foods. So we're thinking alcohol, vinegar, pickles, yogurt, aged cheeses. All of these have the sour taste. It's quite popular in our culture. So these foods, because they're fire and earth, heavy but also heating. So if you're already experiencing those qualities in your body or your mind to excess, then we want to minimize the sour food intake, right? It doesn't mean that we don't ever have it, but if you experience either weight gain or excess fire, you don't want to be having like yogurt every morning and then cheese throughout the day, that sort of thing. Lots of alcohol. And then the salty taste, which includes, of course, salt, but also things like tomatoes and zucchini have a natural saltiness to them. So the salty taste is a combination of water and fire elements. So it's heating as well and more liquid. And so again, we understand now that we can use salt in moderation at this time of year because it has that heating quality, but it's also got this liquid quality because it has the earth element. And so again, in the spring, we want to minimize the salty taste. And anytime there's excess kapha or excess pitta, less of the salty, less of the sour. Pungent taste, which are things like spices, onions, garlic. Pungent taste is a combination of fire and air element, fire and air. So it's heating, but it's also light. So we have to be careful with vata. We want to warm up vata, but we don't want to make it too light, right? So just nice, gentle, warming spices. But you can imagine if the pungent taste is fire and air, and it's heating and it's light, it's perfect for kapha. So it's very good at this time of year, or if you tend to have excess kapha. We want more of the pungent taste. And clearly, pitta already has enough fire, so we want to really moderate our pungent taste intake. And then the bitter taste, which we don't get a lot of generally, includes, of course, coffee, grapefruits, dark leafy greens, asparagus, and of course many medicines are of the bitter taste. The bitter taste is a combination of air and space. So it's really light. We don't recommend it in excess for Vata types. So if you already have a lot of Vata and you're eating a lot of dark leafy greens and you're suffering from gas and bloating or anxiety and restlessness, you want to have less, like have the dark leafy greens but maybe like 3 days a week instead of 7 days a week. But who would bitter taste be perfect for? Kapha types, and then at Kapha time of year. So we want to maybe have a little more of the bitter taste at this time of year, as we're moving into spring. And also it's good for Pitta types as well. So know that the bitter taste is great for Kapha, but also for Pitta. There's that lightness, that light quality that Vata just naturally has, and we need to bring more into Kaphas and Pittas for balance. And then astringent, which really means drying. So we think about foods like, if you've ever had pomegranate, it sort of dries out your tongue. I always use underripe bananas as an analogy, although hopefully you don't eat a lot of underripe bananas. They're not too easy to digest. Potatoes have an astringency, white potatoes, lentils, beans. Anything that has that drying quality, we think of it as astringent. And astringent is a combination of air and earth elements, which is really interesting because it has that airiness to it. Think about beans that create gas, but it does have a heaviness as well. So the astringent is really ideal for Kapha, right? It's very balancing for Kapha. It's good for Pitta, but we don't want too much of it if we have a lot of Vata already. So we would just, if you're having, say, lentils and beans for protein sources, small amounts, and we would want more oils to sort of counteract the effects. So you can still get the nutritional benefits of eating those foods, but we want lots of good oils to help us digest them because we already have dryness in the digestive tract. So the goal in Ayurveda is actually that we have all 6 tastes, all 6 rasas in every meal. Sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. I'll be honest, I don't usually have all 6 tastes at breakfast, but I do my best to have them at lunch and dinner. But now that you understand where the tastes come from, you can start to modify your meals to suit your body type or the season, basically how you're feeling. So for pacifying Vata, we want Vata to have more sweet, sour, and salty. Doesn't mean that they can't have pungent, bitter, and astringent, but more sweet, sour, and salty. The Pitta body type, or in Pitta time of year, we want to have more of the sweet taste, but also bitter and astringent. Sweet, bitter, and astringent for Pitta are best, and then we want to reduce the sour, the salty, and the pungent. And then for Kapha, we want to increase or have more of pungent, bitter, and astringent. We want the light foods, the heating foods, and then reduce sweet, sour, and salty. So this is one way that you can start to look at your meals, and it's not that you have to cut anything out completely unless it really disagrees with you, but we just start to notice how we're responding to certain foods, and we just, for the most part, change the proportions so that we can still have the foods that we enjoy, but we don't send ourselves out of balance because we enjoy those foods that don't really work for us so much.